May be seated. Shabbat Shalom. So, Brian is going to bring a text to you for us to study. I optimistically made 15 copies, and we have more than 15 people. So if 2 people are sitting next to each other, you only get one. All right, and before we begin, Jacob, I want to ask you a question. All right. Translation question, and forget any Rashi or commentary or whatever. How would you translate the following phrase? V'chol ha'olam ro'im et hakolot. With a coup.
So and the whole world is
Well, kol ha'am.
whole nation is eating the origin.
Right. The whole people is seeing the noises or seeing the voices, right? Yeah, thank you. You've been very helpful. Right? And you guys who all know me for a while, you know how I rail against when English translations solve problems by mistranslating, right? But Exodus 20:18, talking about the revelation, it says, V'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot. All the people saw the voices, right? And that's crazy. People don't see voices, right? So we'll translate it as perceived or heard, but that's not what it means. It says ro'im, it says they saw. Okay, now there is this phenomenon known as synesthesia, where your sense and people see colors and people see words, right? And so, I mean, I don't know exactly what it's like because I don't have it, but I do know at least one person who does have it. And you're all soft about this. Anyway, so this commentary trying to explain what the heck it means that the people saw the voices is from the Sfas Emes, and he was the 3rd rabbi of the Ger Hasidim. He lived in Warsaw, late 1800s, early 1900s, and this is his Torah comment. He says, as it is said, I am the Lord thy God. In other words, the Hebrew is in the singular, right? There's a difference between the singular and the plural. It says, Ani Adonai Elohecha. Your God, not Elohechem, y'all's God, right? So it's in the singular. So what does that mean? Each Israelite saw the essence of God's existence. And they saw eye to eye that portion of God's supernal soul which resides in each of them. Okay, so that's what it means when it says saw. They saw the essence of God, and they saw the spark of God that lives in each person. Okay? Therefore, they did not need to believe in the commandments. Right? It's not a question of belief. Now, you have to understand, right, the Sfas Emes, living in Warsaw, a major cosmopolitan city in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, modern biblical criticism has already begun. I'm sure he's aware of it. And he said, and you know, so the question always, right? And do you believe, right? Do you believe God gave the Torah? All right, and Sfas Emes says, you don't need to believe anything. It's not a matter of believing, it's seeing, right? They say, right? He says, I don't know, I don't believe that God exists. I don't need to believe that God exists. Why? Because I know that God exists, right? What's the difference between belief and knowledge, right? I know that God exists because I've seen God, right? Because I was at Sinai too, right? Comments or questions on that? Okay. We'll go on. This is maybe my favorite verse. It's certainly my favorite verse in the Sfas. It may be or paragraph. It may be my favorite paragraph in all of rabbinic literature. It says in the Midrash that when God said, I am the Lord thy God, all creatures trembled. Each creature thought that God was speaking to it, for God is the God of all creatures. Okay, in other words, when the revelation started, right, the whole world hears it, right? And not only human beings, but animals and bugs and flowers, right? And God is saying, I am the Lord thy God. Ani Adonai Elohecha. And every creature thinks that God is speaking to it. Why do they think that? Linda? Yeah, Toby?
He used the singular, and each creature felt God was talking to him.
Right, God used the singular, right? So when you say, I am the Lord thy God, who is that potentially addressed to? Everything, right? I don't have to be a Jew for God to be my God. I don't have to be a human being even for God to be my God, right? And 20 years ago, I don't know that I would have believed this, but having now been a dog person for 20 years, and I don't want to offend cat people, but if we believe that God is love, then for the most part, there is no godlier creature on earth than a dog, right? It's pure love. And right, and dog is God spelled backwards, right? So I don't know if the Sfas ever do that.
I'm sorry.
No, cats are fine too, you know? So they're all excited because God is speaking to them. Right, but when they heard the voice, continue, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, they realized that the revelation was only intended for Israel. Right, because, you know, the giraffes are saying, oh man, right, we didn't leave Egypt, it's not for us, right? Bummer, right? This really, I won't say, this is terrible, right? Because we thought it was for us, but it's only for Israel, because Israel is the only ones who were brought out of Egypt, right? And what's interesting here, right, in the Siddur, there are three main things: creation, revelation, redemption. Right? And when you talk about, well, is it possible for Jews and non-Jews to pray together? There's one mode that I would say, yes, creation. Creation, right? Because we're all created by God, right? But revelation, the Torah, is not for everybody, right? Despite, you know, the passion of some people to put 10 commandments everywhere, right? The 10 commandments, I mean, it'd be nice if instead of putting them up, they actually follow them. But, you know, can't ask too much. But they're clearly not intended for everyone. They're intended for us. I am the Lord thy God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, right? Remember the Sabbath day, right? So they realized that the revelation was only intended for Israel, but. Of course, it is the case that God's word is for all creatures, right? There is revelation for everybody, right? The 7 Noahide laws, which I don't want to go into right now. But a special distinction was given to Israel that through them, God's sovereignty might be established upon all creatures. And every Jew must know that it is his or her duty to establish God's sovereignty on everything. That is why the Torah says, you will be unto me a kingdom of priests. Okay, so according to the Sfas Emes here, what's the point of the Jews? Right? Why do the Jews exist? What is the task of the Jews?
Be faithful to God. Be faithful to God.
Right, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
You said to be faithful to God.
Be faithful to God, but it's more than be faithful to God. Right, it's to, yeah.
To live a godly life so that it spreads to everyone else as well, because we're trying to temple the world,
Right,
but not like the sovereignty, God to all, we have to live a life that will spread to all.
exactly. I couldn't explain it better, right? To live a godly life so that others will see and be inspired, right? To live a godly life as well, right? In other words, the purpose of Jews is not simply to fight anti-Semitism, right? I mean, if I am not for myself, who will be for me, right? So we have to do that, but there's more to being Jewish than fighting anti-Semitism, right? There's more to being Jewish than supporting Israel. There's more to being Jewish than remembering Bobby's gefilte fish, right? The purpose of being Jewish, in other words, we don't exist only for ourselves, right? We exist for the entire world, right? A minor task that God has given us, right? But that's what it says. This means that even though God is the sovereign of the universe, nevertheless, it was God's will that his sovereignty be established by means of Israel, that they should crown him. Right? Lydia,
No,
someone?
I was sharing.
Oh, okay. So that's the purpose, right? So, you know, I mean, it's, and a friend of mine who first introduced me to the Sfas Emes said that he was the first postmodern Jewish theologian. And he really is, because, you know, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about frequently is that we set up these dichotomies, right? And they're false dichotomies, right? Ritual or ethics, right? Helping Jews or helping everybody, right? And here is very clear. What is the, in other words, the Torah was given to Israel and only to Israel. So the Torah is for the Jews. But the Torah is also for everybody. Right? At the same time, it's only for the Jews and it's for everybody. And it's our job, as Linda said, to live a godly life so that so that people will see and be inspired to live this. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, Shabbat Shalom.